Hello, my name is Matthew Crabb. I'm the CEO of QA Media, and our information platform is QA Financial. I hope you're familiar with it, www.qafinancial.com. We run events around the world, and our next live event, in fact, is in Chicago on April the 5th. But we also run these online seminars, and this is our series which we've called The Future of Software Quality Management. And each of these seminars is designed to address some of the key topics and the key challenges facing financial firms in software management, testing, quality engineering, and more broadly DevOps. And we focus in particular on the compliance and the business drivers of quality management at financial firms. And for today's session, which is titled the Breaking Down the Barriers to Continuous Testing, I'm joined by Shai Cohen from Amdocs Quality Engineering and Amir Rosenberg from Quali. And in a minute, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about their roles and their companies before we start a brief presentation by Shai, who's going to take us through a deck on which will provide an overview, a basis for our conversation. And then Shai and Amir are going to be discussing some of the more detailed topics that relate to those particular challenges faced by financial firms. So for example, this compliance challenge, regulators are looking much more closely at the processes that financial firms are using to manage software quality. And so we know that this is something that you, our audience, are looking at more and more too. One final point, if you have a question, please do share it. Simply click on the Q&A button towards the bottom right of your screen, write your question, and we'll be watching out for them and coming back to you to put your questions to Shai and Amir, your contributions. First of all, Shai, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and Amdocs?
Share my screen. Hi, Matthew. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me and see me?
Yes.
All right. So, hello again. My name is Shai. I'm from Amdocs. Amdocs is a software services company, one of the leaders in the market for telco, media, entertainment, banking, and fintech. Amdocs looking on 5 main strategic pillars to create excellent customer experience, 5G, cloud, digital, media, and automation. Within Amdocs, I'm part of a business unit called Amdocs Quality Engineering. We provide quality engineering and testing services to customers all over the world. You can see the split. It's pretty impressive. The service unit is about 3,500 people. Most of our engagements, telco, banks, fintech, we have 80 projects at more or less at any given time. 18 of them are enterprise level. I'm the CTO of the organization, which means we build, in my group, we build the technology, we build processes, new services, and new offering for all of our customers. Some of the innovations that we build, part of the 50 patents that we develop along the years, with rewards and prizes that we gain along the years. Overall, myself, I'm 20 years in software testing and quality engineering. I did a lot of roles. We're very proud of the journey that I did until the recent role. That's about me.
Okay, thanks, Shai. Amir.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, Shai. I'm so excited to meet everybody here on the webinar. My name is Amir Rosenberg. I am a VP product at Quali, an American-Israeli company. I myself am based in Boston and a proud father of 3 girls, just after the International Women's Day. Let me tell you about Quali. Quali is about infrastructure automation. We are looking to democratize infrastructure, which essentially means that that black box of infrastructure becomes inherently available and transparent, whoever you are in the organization. Whether you're an IT professional being asked by developers to stand up infrastructure, which takes you 3 weeks of approvals and touching hands, and it goes through an immense ticketing system. We provide a system that automates that entire process. And within governance, which is going to be a big topic for today, within a couple of minutes, a developer or whoever needs it can get the infrastructure they need. Furthermore, for DevOps architects and for developers, we provide the same level of application holistic schema and blueprints for the CI, for automated pipelines, or for development, or for testing by QA professionals, etc., automated testing or manual testing in a governed and cost-efficient manner. And so we enable innovation, but with the guardrails in place. And that is going to be the topic of today's conversation. Very much looking forward to your participation and questions.
Great. And I guess, Amir, this is what everybody now calls testing on demand. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Shai, you're going to take us through a deck for the next 5 minutes or so, which will just introduce some of the broad themes that are going to underpin our conversation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Let me just share again. So I think we can go ahead and start with first understanding some of the complexity of today. Just to put everyone on the right context of the discussion. We see a lot of changes, a lot of disruptions in the market, but that's eventually translated to huge challenge and complexity that every IT organization is having. I would start from left to right. Way too many variables. We're talking about the way that the consumer, the end user are executing services. The actual execution is not traditional. It's not the one that we saw a couple of years ago. They're using different operational systems. They're using different devices. They're using different payment methods. They're using in a different location. It all give us much more complexity. The real world scenarios is much more advanced, bring us a lot of challenges in the world of quality engineering and enforce us to change the way that we do testing. This is not, we need all to understand that this is not the same way that we did testing in the past. We have to look at it differently. The value of a defect or a bug in production that eventually the customer experience is cost much more today than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and definitely 10, 15 years ago. We have a lot of complexity. We see it in all of the different industry, whether it's in online banking, whether it's in telecommunication, in media, in retail, in all other consumers. And one of the things that we don't know is the customer behavior, the human behavior is unpredictable. It's really unpredictable, and we don't know what we don't know. It's really hard to predict that. And we need to invent ourselves. We need to invent the way that we do testing. Just briefly looking on what we had in the past couple of years, there are different disruptions that change the way that we do and think testing and quality engineering today. First is, of course, the Agile and DevOps adaptation. A lot of the organization either started a journey or in the journey already. The problem is that everyone is kind of translating the way of doing Agile and DevOps in a different way. And if you have an organization that is not there, they will be there, and everyone is going to go and employ Agile practices very soon. The second, of course, is the digital transformation. It happens in banks, it happens in other industry, but everybody is going digital. Everybody is changing the way that they're providing services to customers in a digital way, and they're investing more effort, more IT spending year over year. Digital banking specifically increased their budget among other industries. We see that from our customers. And if that's not enough, the COVID just accelerating all of these trends. We see things that happening faster in the market than it was before. Amir, anything to add from your side?
Yeah, definitely. I think that we're going to talk about these trends in a couple of minutes, but certainly we're seeing a lot of businesses moving to deliver their services over the internet, whether it's, you may remember 4 years ago, we were counting the number of physical branches actually being transferred into money invested into digital applications. I think COVID simply accelerated that. The word simply, it might not be a good word for that, but probably a big problem for a lot of people. But the goodness of it is that it kind of forced us to get serious about digital transformation, delivering services over the internet. It forced us to think about scale while maintaining governance. And it also forced us to rethink how we do testing, how we ensure quality. What are the user expectations? And how do we ensure that we don't block the automated pipeline and we stall the time to market with testing, that we are actually contributing to innovation and time to market rather than stalling it.
Exactly.
Okay, let me come back in at this point. Thanks for the broad view, Shai, and particularly that number. 40% of financial services firms have been increasing their spending on IT by more than 5%. And we've seen some very big numbers recently in connection, for example, with JP Morgan's total annual spend, for example. What is driving this, apart from these general trends towards the increasing adoption of Agile and DevOps, digital transformation, cloud migration, and you talked also, Shai, of course, about the accelerant, or sorry, Amir, about the accelerant of COVID to these trends. What is it that your customers among financial services firms are trying to achieve in terms of continuous testing, and where are they generally speaking on the curve? Perhaps generalization isn't appropriate, but what sort of broad challenges are they telling you that they are facing right now for the next 12 months, 24 months?
So I'll start. I have one thing that, you know, the number one thing, I know that Amir is very anxious to share some of his insights. From my side is knowledge and skills. You know, that's in one word, but in a little bit more details. One of the things that we saw because of all of these disruptions, what happened in the industry is that everybody got panic. When we used to see a big testing organization in the past, they had dozens of people that doing testing services, but they were at the end of the chain. The last group, that person that they had to go to see that the product is working, and guess what? It didn't. And eventually it goes with more delays and more releases until it gets into production. But whenever we saw DevOps and Agile and digital transformation and cloud, everybody got panicked. So they started to decentralize the testing organization and start to sending them to the Scrum team, to the squad. And they thought that, okay, with that, we'll be able to achieve faster time to value, more productivity, more efficiency. It didn't work. The magic didn't work. What happened, because we changed the way that we're doing delivery, changed the way that we're doing development, we changed the way that we're doing operations, but we didn't change the way that we're doing testing. Without enough skills and knowledge to the testing and a true transformation of the roles of the tester that was 10, 15 years ago to a software developer engineering test, SDET. This is a common term that exists in all of the big firms that you see today, not just in telco and banks, in everyone, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they don't have testers, they have SDETs. Test architects, automation architects, you infuse them with SREs also, with data scientists. We're talking about the whole revolution of the quality engineering. And if you don't equipment with the right skills, if you don't transform your team to the new level of the roles of the tester, you will not be able to achieve a success here. So
yeah, there's a very interesting balance that needs to be achieved, particularly for larger firms, between federated decisions driven by business lines on the quality gates that are appropriate, on the different degrees of testing required by apps for different markets. That federated structure, if you like, the necessity of having decentralized decisions, with the necessity also to have best practice and enterprise-wide decisions on tooling, on some tooling, for example. This goes back to what you were saying, Amir, about what Quali is doing in terms of facilitating testing on demand.
That's right. And I think to complement what Shai said, we're seeing testing become an inherent part of the software development lifecycle. We're trying to minimize barriers, particularly human, that basically stall the time to market and stall innovation. And so you see new technologies that are available and appropriate a little bit more towards developers, and certainly test automation professionals who code, for sure. And increasingly they have access to the code, and we're familiar with the technologies out there. What I'm seeing, and I want to share with you a little anecdote that I had yesterday. I was speaking yesterday to this CEO who's building a startup in the financial services market, and naturally she sees those transformations. Her mantra is developers test, or at least we have testers who code. Naturally, there's a skill set challenge because now you raise the barrier to people who know how to code at a minimum. But she sees this from a different angle, which I think is very unique to this conversation here. She's operating in the financial services market, and she has to maintain SOC 2 and other compliances standards from the get-go. And in some ways, you would say the mantra of startup CEO is probably the toughest job in the world. I would say in this lens, it's actually the opposite, because she gets to build her own organization in a certain fashion from the get-go. The individual teams are thinking about velocity, they're thinking about innovation from the get-go, organically considering testing and governance, okay? If you think about a medium to large size financial organization who's trying to move from on-prem to cloud technology, who's trying to unify tooling and processes when it comes to testing and SDLC, how do you ensure, not just introduce, governance in place at all times? And so this is I asked, how many times a week are you present in the decisions where you need to choose between getting a feature out there and being competitive and breaking your compliance? For her, the answer was, I am never in these conversations because the answer is obvious. How easy is it in a larger organization? Not easy.
Yeah. Shai, do you want to comment on this compliance challenge and what you're seeing in terms of your customers' requirements?
So obviously the people is not the only thing. The processes and the technology is coming all together. Compliance is a key ingredient in understanding how to deliver quality at scale. So we have to take that into consideration. What we think is the right approach is actually taking or understanding how to design. You know, when we used to do a test design, we always do it at the end of the chain and not at the beginning. Now, if you think how to design a project from the very beginning in terms of the solution, but you then also think how to test it, how to build the right test environment and the test data in order to test the right solution right from the beginning before you even started to write a single line of code, that's a change in the mindset, and it will by definition, it will bring you more quality when you actually start to do testing in the Scrum and in the end-to-end later on. So this is how we try to make compliance embedded into the testing process right from the day one.
Good. We should also talk about cost, because cost is a factor in every organization's decisions about testing. We're hearing more and more about the objective of risk-based testing, where your test results inform how you optimize testing, partly to not over-test, not to spend too much time testing. Amir, perhaps you'd like to, if I could ask you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of cost management in test automation, and how in particular firms are assessing the trade-off between the upfront cost of new technologies and the longer-term maintenance costs, because of course everybody's trying to save money with automation, but it doesn't always deliver savings upfront, does it?
Absolutely, and I think that it's kind of helpful that we're raising this topic, because clearly, you know, top of mind is innovation and time to market. We want to provide an exquisite and functional user experience. Cost is usually a tertiary consideration when you think about continuous testing and so forth. The reality of it is, as a QA lead or as a tester, when you think about continuous testing on manual testing, do you have the environments available for you to test in? I am seeing a lot of teams actually being forced to test in production. And furthermore, do you have an environment that looks like production, or do you cross your fingers and hope that nothing happens in production? And when it does, when you have an outage, are you actually debugging in production? To hear about 3 hours outages because you're debugging in production is actually not unheard of. People do that. One of the reasons is cost, because as we know, cloud native technology is designed to scale. And so you keep your low environment, your test environment, skinny and cost efficient. And there's not too many of those. And so I think this is something that we need to be cognizant of. It's not a topic that usually comes up in these type of conversations. We need to recognize the need to enable that continuous testing within the SDLC. And there is a cost associated with it. Now, in any investment, there needs to be predictability and there needs to be tracking. And those, I believe, will provide both the tech lead, the VP engineering, the tooling to justify the investment in providing those testing teams the environments that they need and not rely on production.
Are there any guidelines, benchmarks you offer financial services clients about what this trade-off is in real terms, the savings that can be achieved from testing in the cloud? I mean, do you have any anecdotal evidence of what kind of cost efficiencies can be achieved?
Absolutely. Most organizations are keeping their integration environment, whether it's the top of tree, the main branch, whether it's the staging environment where most of testing happens, as stale, static, ongoing environments. Number one, they become stale. This is why I mentioned stale. But number two, these are static environments that are available all the time. And now the commits from developers are stacking up. How many times have we been in a situation where the build is broken, statement, and you cannot introduce new commits and testing is postponed? What we argue is that with the right set of tooling, the technologies, blueprinting, and so forth, you can spin an on-demand environment that is actually richer. And in effect, you can actually save a lot of money instead of keeping one static environment that's continuously available. If you have environments for each time a tester wants to run a test, for each commit, that is more cost efficient. And you can use those gains to make that environment mimic production a little better, enabling you to also capture those defects that make assumptions about elements in production.
Excellent. Thank you. Shai, I don't know if you want to further comment on that, but the other topic that I wanted to move on to now was something you alluded to earlier when we were talking about.
Just a quick comment from my side to complement Amir. The two things that are kind of air and water for testing is data and environment. And these are the biggest two challenges that we see in every customer, every discipline, every area, every domain. So I very sympathize to what Amir is saying. Every customer is looking to change the way that they consume environment, and they don't want to spend a lot of money on environment. They're looking always on a different solution. Although it's very challenging, it's a big mindset change from the way that they used to work with environment. But those who are already changed their mindset and in the journey, they are on it.
Yeah. So we had a question from one of our one member of our audience who's asking you both to comment on the opportunity for, if you like, infrastructure as code and the application in particular of containerization technologies. And we know that this is something that a decision that a lot of financial firms are making. Do we invest in containerization? And when it goes wrong, I mean, it went wrong quite spectacularly at Lloyds Bank a couple of years ago, where these technologies were being applied without being fully understood, and the website went down for 3 weeks. These are not, particularly for larger financial firms, easy to apply. But perhaps you could say a little bit about infrastructure as code and containerization, spin up and tear down models. Amir, that's what Evan, one of our, somebody who's in our audience today, would like you to speak a little bit about.
Absolutely, exactly. I think this is a science, infrastructure as code, and more broadly, describing an entire application consisting of the infrastructure, the platform, and the application layer as code, for it to be versioned and so forth. So if your DevOps engineer leaves the company, there are artifacts. If there's a defect in production, there are artifacts that provide evidence to the context of the defect and so forth. If a developer does a build and commit, you know exactly what you tested on, and where there's a defect, you're able to find it. So one of the things that we're providing, and one of the things that naturally that we're advocating, is that there is an environment that is well described, with versioned in a simplistic but robust manner, and describe the entire application topology for each and every commit. And so you can run continuous testing for every commit that happens on a known and versioned set of components. If you go back to the topic of cost management, you can have 10 DevOps architects. We all know the salary cap of DevOps architects and so forth. You can have 10 of those managing the various teams and having Terraforms and containers and Helms and whatnot. Or you can have a solution, much like testing, that actually orchestrates all of this.
And how does that impact? We were talking earlier about costs. How does that impact on costs? For example, everybody's concerned increasingly about rising costs for cyber risk management and security in general.
So we see typically the ratio between a DevOps engineer and the set of developers between 1 and 10 in that area. And so if you do a quick calculation, when your company grows over, let's say, 10 teams, each of them consisting about 3 to 5 developers, you already cross the cost of being cost efficient with a tool, which naturally, if you think about it, how many of us have been in an environment where teams did the Wild West and each of them described the application architecture, only to come to a point in the maturity and scale where you go and say, we need to rebuild our architecture. So starting with a tool and a set of DevOps architects that think about scale, think about the roadmap of the application topology from the get-go, think about how we're going to test this, how we're going to remove blockers. That's the right way to go. And it becomes cost efficient very early on.
Good. Shai, can we come back to you on the point that you raised earlier? Because of course there's an obvious link here with, first of all, this cost topic. Secondly, the topic of the application of new DevOps technologies more broadly, you raised the point about the requirement for firms to reskill, for their teams to have the right skills for all this. How do you see your clients managing that very major challenge? Are you on, I think you may be on mute.
Yep. Okay. My bad. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. So if you look on the journey to be a true quality engineering and for customers, and you're right, customers are more or less stuck somewhere between the decentralized, as I mentioned before, to paying the technical debt. Because skills is one thing, and having the right people is also part of that. But what Amir mentioned about the having the right mindset of technology, and sometimes it's also the lack of infrastructure, because we're using big environments, we're using a lot of consumer on these environments, and we have a lot of troubles to stabilize these environments, and sometimes they're not available. And one of the two, as I mentioned before, one of the two major challenges that everyone is having is data and environment, and it's even less than the functional code. The journey is not easy, but people need to understand that a part of the mindset change of the organization, the quality, the understanding of quality is not something that is a byproduct at the end of the chain. It's something that you have to start from the very beginning. You have to change the way that you're not just using quality, but also having harness quality that helping and service the whole organization. Because sometimes the inability to scale is causing us a lot of troubles to handle all of the disruptions that we have in the market. For example, if I create a framework that I can provide test data to all of the organization, I want it to be in a self-service manner. So everybody will be able to use it, and not everybody go and ask for someone to create data that will take a lot of time. So this is it's a long journey. You started from understanding the challenges of the organization through an assessment process, but then you go and building a roadmap for the whole organization to implement the quality engineering initiatives.
Very good. Good. So, what would be your comments, just following on from Amir's comments on costs? In order for costs to be predictable, what do firms have to do? And again, connecting that to the need to enable more teams to test in production-like environments and to upskill. Are there examples that you've seen of best practice for actually transitioning your teams? I mean, in practice.
So automation, we didn't talk about automation yet. So one of the things that everybody can do is to make automation a practice of everyone in the organization. You can't expect that automation will be only an artifact of the testing team or the quality team. Mm-hmm. If you enforce automation to be from day one, from the developer, if you create automation at Scrum level, if you know how to connect automation to the CI process, if you know how to reuse automation packages that are being created at a Scrum level in the end-to-end level, this is giving you a jump lift to the next level, because you are working faster. You don't need to create things from scratch. Your processes that you want to test on the end-to-end level is already automated. You don't need to create scenarios for them. So this is only one aspect. I mentioned before about data. If you have a way to create this data fast, this is one of the things that can help every organization to move faster. If you, let's take another example, service virtualization. Sometimes the interfaces not available. I don't have them. I don't have the connection from the team because they are still working. It's not ready, or the third party is not even giving me access to their testbed. So virtualize the environment. Have a real feedback, because eventually this is what Agile means for, right? You want to get the feedback as early as possible. So virtualize it, use it, connect it to your environment, and run the process. So there's a lot of things that can be done in order to speed up, that eventually saves you money.
Yeah, and in terms of incubating best practice, in terms of rawly communicating best practice, what sort of advice do you draw from the experience of some of your customers? What do you see financial firms in particular doing well in this respect?
So I think financial services, we see it in one of the companies that we work with to give a consulting. They seems to know their customers pretty well. But if there is one thing that I would add on top of that is use the crowd wisdom. Crowd testing is one of the things that we recommend everyone to do, because there is so much that quality engineering and professional testers can predict in advance and can build in terms of business process, as much as you know the customers, as much as you know how it behaves. But if you will add a cycle of crowd testing at the end of your testing, this will give you a value of view of how the real customer behave. If you remember, one of the things that I mentioned in one of the first slide is that we don't know the customer. The customer behavior is unpredictable. But what if we're going to use crowd and defining a community, a specific community that can give us the real value of what's happening with a product in production? It can be an online banking application that I'm launching, and I want to get a feedback. So I did all testing before that, but if I'm going to give that to a crowd community for 2 days of testing, you will be amazed to see that there are a lot of things that we didn't find earlier, because we just not behaving the same and not looking at the same thing.
Okay, and you're talking about different types of behavior. We're talking about different skill sets. We're also seeing new kinds of roles emerging. Interesting. There's the role of the software developer, engineer in test, for example, is something that
right.
We're hearing more and more about. What do you think is the relevance of that? I mean, in terms of its importance to these changes.
It is crucial, because we move all the people to the left and put them in the Scrum team. We actually change the way that they are working. It is not a functional or manual tester anymore. The expectation from an SDET, a software developer engineer in testing the Scrum, is to create automation for every feature that's being developed in the Scrum. He is the quality gatekeeper. Now, if something is missing and he cannot do the test, then build a virtualization asset. He's the one that's responsible for that. He's the one that's creating, I'm calling it the building block. It's like a Lego. He's starting with a very minimal piece, because then if you take that automation and reuse that and connect it to the CI process, then eventually you have a regression process that you don't need to create from scratch. You already have the automation, just connect it. And for that, you need an automation framework that knows how to connect automation assets, whether it's TestNG or Selenium or Ginger or other thing, but something that knows how to orchestrate all of that and run it in the end-to-end.
Okay.
The role of an asset is very crucial to the organization now.
Okay. Well, we've got another question related to this topic that's come in that I'm going to put to Amir, actually. The question is, when we talk about quality engineering, what's the best practice to engage the business users during the user acceptance testing process through automation? So business-driven requirements, Amir, what is best practice?
Yeah, I think that, you want to be very clear and specific about the type of behaviors that you want people to flow through. because you know, people can go through, especially in crowd testing, for example, you can go through, you can diverge, and in some respect that's goodness. In some respect, it diverges from the module or behavior that you wanted to test. I think that the end users, it would be good to provide them some naive level of guidance, but limit that, not to block them and guide them, because you want to learn the unknown. You want to find that black swan that you weren't aware of. And so it's a really good way to find that. Technologically, there are ways to facilitate the path, the behavior that these users will go through. But there's also ways inside both web and mobile applications to collect the artifacts required to understand the natural user behavior, their natural flow, as well as collect logs for any defects or any misbehavior that actually happened during that journey.
Okay, good.
Can I add to that, Matt?
Oh, of course.
So one of the processes that we built, it's actually on, we use the MVP from the product management. We call it MTV, minimal testable value. Part of that process, it means that at the beginning of the release of the program, when you have a solution manager and development manager starting to build the whole solution, you infuse them with a role of a professional testing. We call it a test architect. He's coming with a testing mindset. But these trees are not enough. So you have development, you have solution, you have testing. Have your customer also, and the customer can be the end user, or it can be customer like the business user, someone that's joining to this team. Before you even started to write a single line of code, you started to understand how to build a delivery program, how to build the epics. And if you have the feedback from all of the four, and everyone is pushing to his own direction, but you know eventually at the end of that process, you know what will be developed, what will be delivered, and how it's going to be tested. There are zero surprises. So at the end of the release, when you do a demo to your customers, he knows exactly what he's going to get. You minimize the errors, you minimize the surprises, and you already brought in your customers ahead into the design table. You show him what you're going to develop. Okay.
Well, let's draw some of these threads together. And I'd like to ask you both what you see as the ideal quality engineering organization now. What is the state of the art in quality engineering at scale? So quite often I think it's interesting for people working at financial firms to look at other industries, at the media, entertainment, healthcare industries, where there aren't the same business-driven requirements and there aren't necessarily the same compliance requirements. Sometimes things can be done more quickly. Sometimes the testing priorities are completely different. I'm thinking of healthcare, of course. But what would you say are the things that are happening that in different industries that really define what quality engineering should be at scale? Amir, perhaps you'd like to start with that one.
Yeah, I'll touch on a couple of things, and I think Shai will complement. The most unique, and I realize this is an edge case, this is the North Star, but I really recommend for people to consider how do they define and optimize continuous testing strategy, given potentially the North Star that we may all be willing to agree to. It's an organization that ensures an exquisite user experience and enables the optimization of innovation and time to market. And that translates into different measurements in different organizations. But the number one thing that I've seen that really distinguishes between great testing and development teams and the rest of them is the ability to define that North Star that enables alignment inside the teams and enables enablement and optimization. If you have measurements and metrics such as Are we really focusing on the relevant topics that are delivered in this sprint? Or do we have just a unit test that keeps, or smoke test that just keeps growing and growing and growing? Do we have the environments? Are we testing the right things and so forth? You want to establish 2 to 3 metrics that really identify what a quality testing organization looks like, and then try to pursue that. I'm going to hand it over to Shai to complement.
So I want to share one slide that actually can be a great tool for everyone in this discussion. This is what we see as a maturity model for everyone to first to understand where they are. Just consider it as a map, but it also giving you a direction how to be best in class. And this is, Matthew, to your question, the ideal quality engineering organization.
Mm-hmm.
We split it into 4 main areas. One is people and processes, and I talked about the people a lot before, but the processes is very crucial. You can't just change the way the roles of the people in the organization, but if you don't know how to work in the new world, how to change the way you're working for quality engineering.
Shai has dropped. I think just while we wait for him to come back, because he'll simply have to rejoin us. I think he may have just lost his connection, but he'll be back with us. Amir, I'm going to come back to you on a couple of points that go back to some of the specifics around DevSecOps, security ops, and also embedding compliance requirements in the software development lifecycle. These are back to some of the very specific challenges and requirements that financial firms have. We talked about this earlier, but could you talk a little bit more about how this is best done in the context of testing on demand?
Absolutely.
Best practice.
Absolutely. I think there's 2 aspects to that. The first one is determining the type of testing that needs to happen on an ongoing basis, ideally with each commit. If you look at dynamic scans, for example, there's plenty tools out there that basically could add themselves to your Selenium, Appium, Cypress, Testcafe, Espresso tests, and whether it's an SDK inside the app or whether it's trying to. Sorry, Shai.
I'm back. So I don't know what happened. Sorry.
Let me just wrap up, and I'll hand it back to you. There are tools that can be added to your automated testing or your manual testing fairly easily, and the best practice is for you to execute these tests maybe on a regression test where you're a little bit less time sensitive, but essentially there are increasing items of topics that developers are more cognizant and need to be aware of earlier, whether it's the rendering of the site, whether it's functional, whether it's performance, whether it's security, and so on and so forth. The other side of it is, again, going back to making environments available for recurring but not continuous types of tests, for example. So if you think about, if you play in the financial services industry, you need to run a pen test fairly frequently. And so I think in those situations, you want to have a specified environment, a dedicated environment that you can stand up and you can have, either crowdsourcing, trying to attack that environment, or alternatively run a pen test against that environment. And so those are maybe 2 practices. Some are embedded into your continuous testing practice. Some are happening a little bit more infrequent, but they have an environment and a place to work in.
Excellent, thank you. Shai, we'll come back to you now, and let's pick up where you left off. Amir was just talking a little bit about the technical requirements of embedding compliance and DevSecOps in the development lifecycle. Let's go back to your broad map maturity in quality engineering and how people can work out where they are.
All right, I hope you can see it now. Apologize, I don't know what happened, just got disconnected. So I'll start from the very beginning. I don't know where you stop hearing me. This is a maturity model that we build. It's kind of a map for every organization to know where they are. First, where they are in the journey, and second, how they can reach to be best in class. I have to say that for customers that coming and tell us, I want to be best in class, this is already show a lot of maturity, that he understand that they need to change. They understand that they have challenges, and obviously they want to know how to get there. I talk about the change of the people, the change of the processes is not less important. I share just one example of minimal testable value, but there are other examples, especially on automation and how to create data and environment, which also mentioned here, that are crucial to organization in order to shift left. First of all, to have the right agile and DevOps mindset, but then to be in a shift left until they're getting into a stage where they're actually doing a continuous testing, which means all automation is connected to the CI process, the regression is completely automated, and the progression is starting to be almost in a high level of percentage. If I need to, looking on this map and looking on the future, there is one thing that drives us as a service organization for quality engineering that we see in the future, and this is autonomous testing. I know that it's maybe people get scared about it, about the use of AI and machine learning, but this is where the world is going. This is where every major IT is starting to investing, and same as we are. We understand that the day that we're going to do most of the things on the IT level unattended is not so far. We already see robotic process automation exists in different operation activities within business and IT, but testing is not far behind. Whether you can build the different use cases to make more intelligent quality engineering. It's not using AI machine learning. It's not testing AI machine learning. It's using AI machine learning in your quality engineering process. Just imagine a world that you have a new requirement, a new feature, and a system knows how to read it, knows how to create a testing for that, knows how to automate it, execute it, and give you a feedback, all unattended. And we're not so far from that, but this is where we're going.
Very good. So we're nearly at the end of our hour for this seminar. So if anybody has a question, who's listening to us today and would like to ask Shai or Amir, please type it now. But Amir, perhaps I can ask you to start wrapping up by telling us, concluding, what is the way that firms should start accelerating to this next level and to autonomous testing? Because obviously the potential of machine learning and AI-based testing is enormous. What's the first step that you're advising your customers to take?
That's a great question. And I think the reality, particularly if you're working for a relatively large organization, is that the first step is probably the most meaningful and unfortunately the hardest. Mm-hmm. I think that the first step is to culturally and organizationally bring testing into the development team or the development squad. Bring it in, bring the awareness of quality into the development team and start analyzing their processes and how can testing embed themselves as a team and as individuals, as well as tooling into that process in a most impactful, valuable manner and at least disruptive. And I think testing professionals will find more meaningful and more valuable assignment to their day-to-day inside those teams, and developers would find much more value in their findings. I think that's kind of need to be the mindset as we embark upon this testing as part of the SDLC process.
Thank you. Shai, same question in a different way. Can you suggest some of the metrics that firms can apply to assess how far they got on this,
Yeah.
on this journey to maturity that you've described? What are some of the key things that you see firms successfully using to benchmark their progress?
It's an excellent question, and of course, it's not enough to have change in people, process, and technology. You need to measure the way that you do the change. So, if I need to name three things that that I'm recommending, and if you pay attention, this is not entirely related to quality, and because I think quality is everything that we're doing. So the first one is time to value, plain simple. When you measure the way that how much time it takes you from a solution ideation until product in production, just measure it. It can be, let's say, 30 weeks. So that's your benchmark for today, 30 weeks. Now let's start to see how we can improve it to 29, into 28, into 27 weeks. So this is measurement number one. Number two is automation maturity. There was a question before how to get to AI machine learning. You won't get there. It's not a 0 to 100. You don't jump to AI machine learning if you don't establish a maturity of your automation in the IT organization. If you don't have automation at your Scrum team, if you don't have automation in your CI process, if you don't know how to automate your sanity and regression, there is nothing to talk about AI machine learning yet. So automation maturity is what I would measure, and within automation, you can split it into mean time to record. So how long time it takes me to create automation, mean time to maintain, how long it takes you to maintain automation. There are tools that knows how to do this automatically today that fix your automation, so you don't need to do that. So this is what I was focused on. And the last one is Epic certification time. Plain simple, how long it takes you to test an Epic. And if you do automation, if you use environment as a service, if you use service virtualization, it takes you less time to run your testing. So these are my three picks.
So final word to you, Amir. What would you add to that, particularly in terms of metrics, and also Shai mentioned virtualization technologies. What would you say are the benchmarks that you're seeing your clients apply most successfully?
Yeah, I think there is a stat out there that you can hypothetically reach 80% coverage with automated testing. I think that that's a ambitious goal to reach. I see most teams in the 50 to 60%, and there's always some level of manual testing that's happening, whether it's worthy of automating or not. But I think that that's something to aspire to. I think there's a lot of practices around testing. It's complex. Test data management, test case management, and so forth. It's not easy and complex, and actually Amdocs have significant years and years of experience and expertise in that. But I think that if you focus on delivering insights and measuring the insights that you can deliver, and measuring the removal of blockers from time to market, I think that you will definitely be on track to be successful.
Good. Well, I think that's a good place to end. We're on our hour, just about. So thank you both, Shai and Amir, for a very, very interesting conversation. This seminar will be available as a recording. We will mail it to all of you, and it will also be available on our website, www.qafinancial.com. So thank you again, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you again soon.